I've spent 3 years perfecting the art of being invisible at Riverside High. Not the cool kind of invisible like Harry Potter with his magical cloak, but the mundane type where you're just another face in the hallway, another body shuffling between classes, the kind where even the teachers sometimes forget your name halfway through the semester. It's not that I'm particularly forgettable looking, I'm just good at blending in, wearing the right clothes to disappear into the background, knowing which lunch tables to avoid, and most importantly, knowing when to lower my eyes, especially when Madeline Chen walks by. Madeline isn't just popular, she's popular with a capital P, the kind of popular that seems to exist in its own orbit. She's the girl whose Instagram stories get viewed by the entire school within minutes, whose laugh can be heard echoing down the main hallway between classes, whose presence in the cafeteria somehow makes the fluorescent lights seem less harsh and the mystery meat less mysterious. She's also the girl I've been secretly drawing for the past 2 years, not in a creepy way. I promise, I'm an artist, or at least, that's what my anonymous blog's 15,000 followers seem to think. They don't know that at Midnight Converse is really just James Morrison, the quiet junior who sits in the back of AP Art History and hasn't raised his hand once this semester. They don't know that the mysterious figure who posts hauntingly beautiful portraits of high school life is the same guy who eats lunch alone in the library, sketching in a worn Moleskine notebook while pretending to study for calculus. And they definitely don't know that half of my most popular pieces are inspired by stolen glances of Madeline Chen. It started sophomore year, when she was assigned as my lab partner in chemistry. For 6 weeks, I got to see her up close, to notice how she twirls her pencil when she's thinking hard about a problem, how she scrunches her nose when she's confused, how she taps her fingers in a specific pattern when she's nervous about a test. I filled an entire sketchbook with those details, turning them into art that captured not just her appearance, but the essence of who she was in those unguarded moments. The portrait I posted of her hands mid-pencil twirl got featured on ArtStation's front page. Nobody knew it was her. Of course, I never draw faces in my portraits, focusing instead on the small gestures and moments that tell the real story. The way someone's shoulders tense before a presentation, the nervous adjustment of a backpack strap, the triumphant fist pump after acing a test, these are the moments I capture, the ones that make my followers feel like they're right back in high school, experiencing it all over again. But Madeline ... she's different. Every piece I create of her feels like I'm trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Because despite those 6 weeks as lab partners, despite 3 years of sharing the same school halls, despite watching her grow from a confident sophomore into an unstoppable senior, I've never really known her. Not really. Not beyond the careful observations of an artist who's too afraid to actually talk to his muse. That changed last Thursday, when Ms. Rivera signed our final project in AP Art History. "You'll be working in pairs," she announced, and my heart did its usual anxious flutter at the words group project, and before you all start making eyes at your friends, I've already chosen the pairs. I was doodling in my notebook, only half listening as she read through the names. I had perfected the art of tuning out while still catching important information, another survival skill of the professionally invisible. James Morrison and Madeline Chen. My pencil snapped. The sound was loud enough to make a few heads turn, including Madeline's. She was sitting 3 rows ahead and to the left, her usual spot, For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I saw something I'd never noticed before. A small fleck of gold in her left iris, catching the light just so. My fingers itched for my sketchbook, wanting to capture that detail before it slipped away. You'll be analyzing the evolution of self-portraiture through the ages, Ms. Rivera continued, either not noticing or kindly ignoring my stationary casualty. From ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs to modern social media filters. I want you to explore how the way we present ourselves to the world has changed, or hasn't it changed, over thousands of years. The irony wasn't lost on me. A project about self-portraiture with the girl I'd been anonymously drawing for 2 years. A girl who, if she ever found out about my art blog, would probably think I was the biggest creep in the history of Riverside High. Partners should meet to discuss their approach before the weekend, Ms. Rivera added as the bell rang. This is a major part of your final grade. People, take it seriously. I watched as Madeline gathered her things, her movements precise and efficient. She had practice after school. She was captain of the debate team, of course, but she'd have to talk to me at some point. We'd have to meet, plan, work together. The thought made my stomach churn with equal parts terror and exhilaration as I packed up my own belongings, moving with the deliberate slowness that helped me avoid awkward hallway encounters. I felt my phone buzz. A notification from my art blog. Someone had just shared my latest piece, a study of hands gripping a debate podium, knuckles white with determination. It had gotten over 10,000 likes overnight. The hands were Madeline's from last week's state championships. She'd led the team to victory, as always. I'd watched from the back of the auditorium, sketching frantically, trying to capture the intensity of that moment, the way her fingers tensed and relaxed as she delivered her closing arguments. Now she was walking toward me, her expression curious but friendly, probably wondering about the quiet guy she'd be stuck working with for the next few weeks. She had no idea that I knew exactly how many freckles dusted her nose 7, or that I could draw the curve of her smile from memory, or that thousands of people around the world had fallen in love with the way she held a pencil. "Hi James," she said, and my name in her voice sounded like the beginning of either a disaster or a masterpiece. Maybe both. I was thinking we could meet at the library after my practice. Around 5, I nodded, not trusting my voice. She smiled, the small, genuine one that made her nose scrunch slightly, not the practiced one she used for Instagram photos, and turned to leave. As I watched her walk away, I realized that my carefully constructed invisibility was about to be tested in ways I'd never imagined. Because working with Madeline Chen meant she would finally truly see me, and I had no idea if I was ready for that. What I didn't know then was that this art history project would end up being the least of my worries. Because somewhere in the digital ether, in a corner of the internet where art and anonymity danced a dangerous tango, something was about to change. A single click, a stray comment, a connection made, and my carefully separated worlds would begin to collide in ways I could never have predicted. But that's getting ahead of the story. First, I had to survive a study session with the girl who had unknowingly become my artistic muse. And somehow, I had to do it without revealing that I knew her better than any stranger should, that I'd spent 2 years translating her essence into art that thousands adored. I checked my phone again. Another notification, Madeline98 has started following your blog. My heart stopped. The bell rang for next period, but I barely heard it, because suddenly, Invisibility didn't seem like such a sure thing anymore. And the canvas of silence I'd been hiding behind was about to get very, very complicated. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of my masterpiece, or my downfall. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference until the final brushstroke falls. The library at 5 o'clock was a different world from the chaotic hallways of Riverside High. Golden afternoon light streamed through tall windows, turning dust motes into floating stars and making everything feel somehow both more real and more dreamlike. I'd been here since the final bell, attempting to sketch, but mostly just watching the clock and trying not to have a panic attack. Madeline 98 had liked 27 of my posts in the past 2 hours. I knew because I'd been obsessively checking my phone, watching as she methodically worked her way through my gallery. She seemed particularly drawn to the pieces that, unbeknownst to her, featured her own hands, her own gestures, her own moments. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sorry, I'm a little late. I nearly jumped out of my skin at the sound of her voice. Madeline was slightly out of breath, her debate team blazer draped over one arm, her hair escaping from what had probably been a neat bun that morning. She looked exactly like one of my sketches from last spring, the one titled Victory Undone that had earned me a small write-up in an online art magazine. No problem. I managed, quickly closing the Instagram tab on my laptop where I'd been monitoring her progress through my artistic history. I just got here too. That was the first lie. There would be more. Great. She dropped into the chair across from me, and I caught a whiff of something floral. Not perfume, maybe shampoo. I filed the detail away automatically, an artist's instinct. So, self-portraiture through the ages should be interesting, right? She was already pulling out her notebook, the expensive kind with the heavy paper that I'd always wanted to try but could never justify buying. Her enthusiasm caught me off guard. Madeline Chen was known for many things: her debate victories, her perfect GPA, her ability to organize school events that people actually wanted to attend, but I'd never heard anyone mention her interest in art history. Yeah, I said, then forced myself to elaborate. I actually have some thoughts about how social media has kind of brought us full circle to ancient Egypt. Her eyebrows rose. What do you mean? Well, I took a breath, reminding myself that I could talk about art. This was my territory, even if she didn't know it. The ancient Egyptians didn't paint themselves as they actually looked. They used idealized forms, specific poses, and symbolic elements to present the version of themselves they wanted people to see. Kind of like Instagram filters and carefully curated feeds today. Madeline's eyes lit up. That single quotes actually really brilliant. And Instagram is basically modern hieroglyphics, isn't it? We're all just leaving marks saying I was here. This is who I was. This is how I want to be remembered. For a moment, I forgot to be nervous. Exactly. And like hieroglyphics, there's this whole visual language you have to understand. The poses, the filters, the hashtags, they're all symbols that mean something specific to people who know how to read them. Like how everyone knows that posting a black and white photo means you're either being artistic or dramatic. She laughed and then added, almost to herself, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Actually, how we choose to present ourselves online versus who we really are. Something in her tone made me look up from my notebook. She was staring out the window now, absently twirling a pen between her fingers, that familiar gesture I'd drawn so many times. But there was something different about it, something less confident than usual. I found this art blog recently, she continued, and my heart nearly stopped. The artist only draws parts of people, hands, shoulders, the back of someone's head, but somehow they capture more truth in those fragments than most people manage in full portraits. It's like ... they see all the things we think we're hiding. I tried to keep my voice steady. Sounds interesting. It's called Midnight Canvas. She turned back to me, and I desperately hoped my face wasn't as red as it felt. Have you heard of it? Second lie of the day. No, I haven't. You should check it out. Some of the pieces ... double quote. She hesitated, then laughed softly. This is going to sound crazy, but some of them remind me of myself. There's this one of hands gripping a debate podium that could have been from our state championships last week. The artist even got the tiny chip in my nail polish right. I knocked it against the podium when I was setting up my notes. My mouth went dry. I hadn't even realized I'd included that detail. Maybe you have a secret admirer, I joked weakly, immediately wanting to kick myself. But Madeline just smiled, that small, genuine smile that always made my fingers itch for a pencil. Maybe, but it's more than that. It's like, whoever this artist is, they really see people, not just how they look, but who they are in their unguarded moments. It's kind of beautiful, and a little terrifying. I should have confessed right then, should have said actually, I'm Midnight Canvas, and yes, I've been drawing you for 2 years, but I promise it's not as creepy as it sounds. Should have been honest before things got more complicated. Instead, I said, we should probably start outlining our presentation. Third lie, pretending this was just another school project, that my worlds weren't colliding in spectacular fashion, that my heart wasn't trying to hammer its way out of my chest. We spent the next hour planning our approach to the project, and I discovered something surprising. Madeline Chen was actually easy to talk to. When she wasn't surrounded by her usual crowd of admirers, when it was just the two of us discussing art and history and the way humans have always tried to capture their own existence. She was ... real, funny, thoughtful. She had opinions about Byzantine mosaics and strong feelings about the symbolism in Frida Kahlo's self-portraits. As the library lights began to flicker on against the gathering dusk, she pulled out her phone to show me something and accidentally opened Instagram. I caught a glimpse of her screen. She was still on the Midnight Canvas page, my latest post displayed in sharp clarity. Oh sorry, she said, quickly switching apps. I've been kind of obsessed with this account lately. The artist posted something new this morning, and I've been trying to figure out why it feels so familiar. The post in question was one I'd done of her hands arranging debate notes, captured during our study session just minutes ago. I'd posted it during a bathroom break, the art flowing from my pencil almost faster than I could draw it, the way her fingers smoothed the paper, the determined set of her knuckles, the elegant efficiency of her movements. Maybe you just have one of those universal experiences, I suggested, somehow keeping my voice level. Good art often feels personal, even when it's about strangers. She looked at me with surprising intensity. You know, James, for someone who hardly talks in class, you have some really interesting thoughts about art. I observe a lot, I said, which wasn't technically a lie, just a massive understatement. As we packed up our things, Madeline paused. This was actually really fun. Would you want to meet again tomorrow, same time? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Great. She shouldered her bag, then hesitated, and ... Would you mind if I bounce some ideas off you about this artist? There's something about their work that's driving me crazy, like I'm right on the edge of figuring something out. Fourth lie of the day, biggest one yet, sure, no problem. As I watched her leave the library, I pulled out my phone. Madeline Chen had just liked another post, one from almost 2 years ago. A simple sketch of a girl's hand holding a pencil over a chemistry lab report. The caption read, "Some people shine so bright, you can only capture their reflection." I had no idea how long I could keep up this charade, how many more lies I could stack before they all came tumbling down. But I did know one thing. I was going to have to be a lot more careful about what I posted on Midnight Canvas from now on. What I didn't realize was that being careful wouldn't be enough. Because Madeline Chen hadn't become the top debater in the state by missing details. And I was leaving quite a trail of them, one sketch at a time. The next morning, as I walked into school, my phone buzzed with a new comment on my latest post. I know these hands, and I think I'm starting to know who's drawing them. I spent the entire morning in a fog of panic, her comment playing on repeat in my mind. I know these hands, and I think I'm starting to know who's drawing them. I'd read it at least 50 times, analyzing every word like it was a cryptographic puzzle. Did she really know? Was she just suspicious? Was she talking about someone else entirely? The rational part of my brain knew I should delete the comment, maybe even temporarily disable my account. The artist part of my brain, however, did something much more dangerous. It posted a new piece. The sketch was from memory. Madeline in the library yesterday, illuminated by that golden afternoon light. Her face turned toward the window as she talked about ancient Egyptian art. I'd captured her in profile, focusing on the curve of her neck, the loose strands of hair catching the light, the thoughtful set of her shoulders. The caption read, "Sometimes the truth looks better in half shadow." It was risky, probably stupid, definitely revealing. But art had always been my most honest form of communication, and right now, I needed to say something true, even if I couldn't say it directly. I posted it just before first period and turned my phone off completely. AP Art History was third period, and walking into that classroom felt like marching to my own execution. Madeline was already there, bent over her notebook, drawing something. The sight stopped me in my tracks. In 3 years, I'd never seen her draw anything more artistic than a basic diagram for debate prep. I slid into my usual seat, trying to look anywhere but at her. It didn't work. My artist, I caught the details anyway. The smudge of graphite on her left thumb, the intense focus in her posture, the way she kept glancing at her phone as if checking a reference image. Ms. Rivera started class, discussing the Renaissance's impact on self-portraiture, but I barely heard a word. My phone felt like a bomb in my pocket, even turned off. What if Madeline had seen the new post? What if she was putting it all together right now? What if a folded piece of paper landed on my desk? My heart nearly stopped as I carefully unfolded it. Inside was a sketch, not a great one, clearly done by someone who didn't draw regularly, but unmistakably meant to be a hand holding a pencil. Below it, in Madeline's neat handwriting, trying to capture truth in fragments, harder than it looks, "Meet me at lunch." I stared at the note for so long that Ms. Rivera had to call my name twice before I realized she was asking me a question about Rembrandt's self-portraits. I mumbled something about chiaroscuro and emotional honesty that seemed to satisfy her. But my mind was elsewhere. Madeline wanted to meet at lunch. Madeline was drawing hands. Madeline was learning my language. I managed to catch her eye and give a small nod. She smiled, not her Instagram smile, not even her genuine nose-scrunching smile, but something new. Something searching. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. When lunch finally arrived, I found myself walking to the courtyard instead of my usual library hideout. It was a bright autumn day, the kind that usually had me itching to sketch the way light played through the changing leaves. Today, though, my sketchbook stayed firmly closed in my bag. Madeline was already there, sitting at one of the stone tables, her debate team blazer traded for an oversized sweater that made her look softer, more approachable, more like the girl I'd been drawing all these years than the polished public figure she usually presented. "You came," she said, and something in her voice made me realize she hadn't been sure I would. "Yeah." I sat down across from her, noting automatically how the dappled sunlight through the trees created shifting patterns on her face. "Stop it," I told my artist's brain. "This isn't the time." She took a deep breath. "So, I have a theory." My hands clenched under the table. About why certain pieces of art feel familiar." She pulled out her phone, opened Instagram, and turned it toward me. It was my latest post, the one from this morning. "About why the artist seems to see things that most people miss." I said nothing. My heart was doing a complicated gymnastics routine in my chest. At first, I thought maybe they were just really observant. She continued, but then I started noticing details. Like the chip in my nail polish from the debate championships. The way I organize my note cards before a match. The exact angle I hold my pencil when I'm working out a difficult argument. She paused, watching me carefully. Details that only someone who's spent a lot of time watching me would notice. Someone who's been close enough to see these things, but quiet enough that I might not have noticed them seeing. "Madeline," I started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. Because here's the thing, James, when I found Midnight Canvas 2 days ago, I felt seen in a way I've never felt before. Not the way people usually see me, the debate champion, the popular girl, the perfect student, but seen as me, the real me. The one who gets nervous before matches and fidgets with her pencils and sometimes feels like she's performing a role instead of living her life." She pulled something else from her bag, a sketchbook. Not the expensive notebook from yesterday, but a worn moleskin exactly like mine. "So this morning, I decided to try something. I tried to draw the way Midnight Canvas draws. I tried to capture a moment, a gesture, a truth." She opened the sketchbook and turned it toward me. On the page was a rough but earnest sketch of hands holding a different sketchbook, pencil poised above the paper. My hands, I realized with a jolt, from yesterday in the library. "I'm not very good," she said softly. "But trying to draw like this ... it made me understand something. To capture these kinds of details, you have to really look. You have to care enough to notice the small things. You have to ... be invisible," I finished, barely above a whisper. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The autumn breeze rustled the leaves above us, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow across the table between us. Finally, I reached for my own sketchbook. My hands were shaking slightly as I opened it to my most recent drawings. "You're right," I said. about all of it. She leaned forward, looking at the sketches, dozens of them, all of her, all capturing moments she probably hadn't even realized were being witnessed. Her expression changed as she turned the pages: surprise, recognition, understanding, and something else I couldn't quite read. "Why didn't you ever show me?" she asked. I laughed, a short, nervous sound. "Right. Hi, I'm the quiet guy from your AP Art History class who's been secretly drawing you for 2 years. Want to see my portfolio?" "Yes," she said simply. I would have wanted to see it. That stopped me short. "You would have." "James," she closed my sketchbook gently, but kept her hand on it. "Do you know what it's like to be seen the way you see me? Not as an image, not as a projection, but as a person. All these little moments, these gestures, these truths. You saw me when I wasn't performing. You saw me when I was just being." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I know it's weird." "It's not weird," she interrupted. "It's art, real art." And double quotes. She hesitated, then pushed forward. "And maybe it's something else too." The air between us felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, could see the slight flush rising in her cheeks, could sense that we were standing on the edge of something huge. Then her phone buzzed, someone from the debate team asking about afternoon practice, and the moment wavered. "I should go," she said, standing up, "but this conversation isn't over." And double quotes. She smiled, that new, searching smile again. "I think Midnight Canvas should post something new tonight. Something honest." As I watched her walk away, I pulled out my phone and finally turned it on. Notifications flooded in, but I ignored them all except one. Madeline Chen had left a new comment on my latest post. "The truth looks better in full light. Trust me." That night, for the first time in 2 years, I drew her face. The whole thing, not just fragments. I drew her. I saw her in the courtyard, sunlight and shadow playing across her features, that new smile curving her lips, her eyes full of recognition and possibility. The caption read, "Sometimes being seen is scarier than staying invisible. But maybe it's worth the risk." I posted it at midnight, then waited, heart racing, for the world to shift. The post went viral overnight. I woke up to over 50,000 likes and comments flooding in from around the world. Something about the transition from fragments to a complete portrait, from hidden to revealed, had struck a chord with people. The art community that had followed my partial portraits for years was exploding with theories and reactions. Some loved it, calling it a brave evolution of my style. Others felt betrayed, arguing that the mystery of the fragments was what made my work special. But I only cared about one person's reaction. Madeline Chen hadn't liked or commented on the post. The drive to school that morning felt like the longest of my life. Every red light was an eternity, every turn a decision between continuing forward and turning around to hide in my room forever. I'd crossed a line by drawing her full face, by posting it publicly. Sure, she'd suggested I post something honest, but maybe this was too honest, too much, too soon. I pulled into the school parking lot 20 minutes early, hoping to avoid the usual morning crowd. Instead, I found Madeline sitting on the front steps, 2 coffee cups beside her, sketching in what looked like a Numalesque notebook. My feet carried me toward her before my brain could object. "The coffee's getting cold," she said without looking up, and somehow that simple statement, That assumption that I would come, that she'd been waiting for me, made my heart skip several beats. I sat down beside her, accepting the cup she pushed toward me. "You're here early. Couldn't sleep," she replied, finally closing her sketchbook. "Someone posted this amazing portrait at midnight, and I spent hours trying to capture it the way they did." My throat felt tight. And how did that go? She smiled and opened the sketchbook again, turning it toward me. There, spread across 2 pages, was her attempt at a self-portrait in my style. It wasn't technically perfect, the proportions were slightly off, the shading inconsistent, but there was something raw and honest about it that made my artist's heart ache. "I kept thinking about what you said yesterday," she continued, "about being invisible, and I realized something. I've been just as invisible as you, just in a different way. Everyone sees the version of me I put on display, but you saw through that. You saw the real me, even when I was trying my hardest to hide it." I took a sip of coffee to give myself time to process her words. It was perfectly made, exactly how I'd fix it myself if I wasn't too shy to order at busy coffee shops. Another detail she'd noticed about me, apparently. "The portrait," I finally said. "Was it too much?" "It was perfect," she replied immediately. "Terrifying, but perfect." "Do you know why I didn't like or comment on it?" I shook my head. "Because some things are too important for social media reactions." She turned to face me fully. "That portrait wasn't just of me, James. It was of us. The way you see me, the way I'm learning to see you. It's like you've been painting my portrait for 2 years, and now I'm finally starting to sketch yours in return." The morning sun was hitting her face at exactly the angle I'd captured in last night's portrait, and my fingers itched for my pencils, but for once, I resisted the urge to draw. Some moments needed to be lived rather than captured. "I have a confession," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between us. "I knew it was you before yesterday." This was not what I was expecting. "What? How?" "The chemistry lab drawings," she said, a mischievous glint in her. "You posted them right after we were lab partners sophomore year. I remember watching you sketch during experiments when you thought I wasn't looking. I didn't know about the blog then, but when I found it this week, well, let's just say some details clicked into place. You knew for 2 years." I couldn't wrap my head around it. She laughed. "No, I mean I figured it out when I found the blog. Those chemistry sketches were like a signature once. I knew what to look for." But it made me think about sophomore year, about how you were always watching, always noticing things. I used to think you were just shy, but now I understand. You were seeing stories that the rest of us missed. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you?" She countered, but her tone was gentle. "We all have our masks, James. Mine is the perfect student, the debate champion, the girl who has it all figured out. Yours is invisibility. But art. Art is where we tell the truth, isn't it?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Midnight Canvas had been featured on a major art blog. The portrait of Madeline highlighted as a stunning departure from my usual style. "You're not invisible anymore," Madeline said, reading over my shoulder. "How does that feel?" I thought about it for a moment. "Scary," I admitted, "but also right, like maybe it's time for both of us to stop hiding." She nodded, then reached into her bag and pulled out something that made my breath catch. a proper art sketchbook, the expensive kind she'd been using in class. "I bought this yesterday," she said, "and I was thinking, maybe we could both work on our art history project and something else at the same time, something else. A joint project. You teach me to draw the way you do, to see the details that matter. And I'll teach you ... double quotes, to be visible." I suggested when she trailed off. "To be seen," she corrected. "There's a difference." The first bell rang, warning of the approaching school day. Around us, students were starting to fill the parking lot, their morning conversations creating a familiar backdrop of noise. "We should head in," I said, but neither of us moved. "One more thing," Madeline said, pulling out her phone. "I think Midnight Canvas should post something new this morning, a collaboration." She handed me her sketchbook, open to her self-portrait attempt from earlier. Next to it, she'd written in her neat handwriting, "The truth about masks is that they're easier to take off when someone else shows you how." I took out my own sketchbook and, in a burst of inspiration, quickly sketched out 2 coffee cups on the step, steam still rising in the morning light, 2 different brands, 2 different styles, somehow fitting perfectly together. We took a photo of both pages side by side, her words, my sketch, our shared moment. "What should the caption be?" I asked as I opened Instagram. Madeline thought for a moment, then smiled, that real smile that I'd drawn so many times but was only now truly seeing in person. "How about, sometimes the best portraits are drawn together?" As I posted it, watching the likes and comments immediately start rolling in, I realized something. This wasn't just a story about an invisible boy and a popular girl anymore. It wasn't even about art or masks or truth. It was about the space between seeing and being seen, about how sometimes you have to let someone else draw your portrait to understand your own face. And maybe, just maybe, that was the masterpiece I'd been trying to create all along. The second bell rang. This time we did get up, gathering our books and sketchbooks and empty coffee cups. As we walked toward the school entrance, Madeline suddenly stopped. "You know what's funny?" she said. "Everyone's going to think this is the end of the story. The invisible artist revealed, the popular girl enlightened, all wrapped up in a neat bow." "Isn't it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She shook her head, that mischievous glint back in her eyes. "James, this isn't the end of anything. This is just the first sketch." And as we walked into school together, no longer hidden behind our respective masks, I realized she was right. After all, every great portrait starts with a single line, and we were just beginning to draw ours. 3 months later, the Riverside High Art Gallery was packed for the opening of Perspectives, a study in seeing and being seen. The show was technically our AP Art History final project, but it had evolved into something much bigger than a simple assignment on self-portraiture through the ages. Madeline and I stood at the entrance, watching as students, teachers, and even some local art critics moved from piece to piece. The exhibition was arranged chronologically, starting with ancient Egyptian-style portraits we'd created of each other, moving through various historical art periods, and ending with a series of modern pieces that blended social media aesthetics with classical techniques. "I still can't believe Ms. Rivera let us do this instead of a regular presentation," Madeline whispered, adjusting the collar of her blazer, a nervous gesture I'd drawn so many times I could do it from memory. "I still can't believe you convinced the school board to let us take over the whole gallery," I replied. catching her hand and giving it a squeeze. She smiled, that real, nose-scrunching smile that had become so familiar over the past few months. Debate skills come in handy sometimes. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a massive installation we detitled The Evolution of Invisibility. It featured pairs of portraits arranged in a spiral, my fragmentary sketches of Madeline from the midnight canvas days matched with her recent drawings of me, each pair showing how our perspectives of each other had changed over time. In the center of the spiral hung two self-portraits we'd drawn of ourselves, and between them, a collaborative piece we'd created together, a drawing of two people sitting on school steps with coffee cups, rendered in both our styles simultaneously, neither fully visible nor fully hidden. "James," a voice called out, and I turned to see one of the local art critics who'd featured my midnight canvas work approaching. "This is extraordinary work. The progression from anonymity to recognition. The interplay of perspectives. It's a powerful commentary on modern identity." Before my old instincts could kick in, before I could fade into the background and let Madeline handle the social interaction, she nudged me forward. "Thank you," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "But it's really about learning to see and be seen. Madeline taught me that. And James taught me how to really look," Madeline added, stepping up beside me. "Not just at other people, but at myself." The critic moved on, making notes in her little book, and Madeline and I exchanged a glance. 3 months ago, this kind of attention would have terrified me. 3 months ago, Madeline would have given her practiced, perfect responses rather than something real. But we weren't those people anymore. My phone buzzed, another notification from the Midnight Canvas account, which had transformed over the past months into a collaborative project between us. The latest post, which Madeline had uploaded this morning, was a sketch of me sketching her sketching me, an infinite loop of artists and subjects. The caption read, "The best portraits are the ones we draw together." It had already gained thousands of likes, but that didn't seem important anymore. What mattered was the truth captured in those lines, the story told in the spaces between our different styles. "Hey," Madeline said softly, drawing my attention to a group of students gathered around one of the earliest pieces, the first full portrait I'd ever posted of her, the one that had changed everything. "Look at how they're looking at it." The students were pointing out details to each other, discussing the interplay of light and shadow, the meaning behind every line. But what caught my attention was a girl standing slightly apart from the group, sketchbook clutched to her chest, looking at the portrait with a mixture of longing and determination. "She reminds me of someone," Madeline said, a smile in her voice. "Yeah," I agreed, "both of us." As if sensing our attention, the girl turned, her eyes widened with recognition, not of me as the invisible artist or Madeline as the popular girl, but of us as the creators of the work before her. After a moment's hesitation, she walked over. "How ... double quotes," she started, then took a breath and tried again. "How did you learn to see people like this?" Madeline and I looked at each other, years of unspoken understanding passing between us in a glance. "Would you like us to show you?" Madeline asked. The girl nodded eagerly, opening her sketchbook to reveal pages of hesitant attempts at capturing moments and gestures. "The trick," I said, "is to realize that everyone's both the artist and the subject. We're all drawing and being drawn, seeing and being seen. The art is in learning to be comfortable with both roles. And sometimes Madeline added. The most beautiful portraits are the ones we never expected to be part of. As we began to show the girls some basic techniques, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in one of the gallery windows. Madeline and I were standing shoulder to shoulder, our postures mirroring each other unconsciously, both of us gesturing as we explained the interplay of light and shadow. Neither invisible nor performing, just being. I realized that if I were to draw this moment, I wouldn't focus on fragments anymore. I wouldn't need to hide behind partial portraits or anonymous posts. The full picture was so much more interesting to people who had learned to see each other clearly. Teaching someone else to do the same. Later that night, after the gallery had cleared out, and we were sitting on our usual steps with our usual coffee cups, Madeline pulled out her sketchbook. Remember what I said that first morning, about this being just the first sketch? I nodded, watching as she flipped through pages and pages of drawings, some of me, some of her, some of us together, each one marking a step in our journey from invisible artist and popular girl to whatever we were now. I was wrong, she said, stopping at a blank page. There was never just one sketch. We've been drawing this story together all along, haven't we? We still are, I said, taking out my own sketchbook. And there, in the fading light of a day that felt both like an ending and a beginning, we started drawing again. Not fragments, not masks, not carefully curated images, but something real and whole and continuously evolving. Because that's the thing about art, about life, about love. The masterpiece isn't in the final portrait. It's in all the sketches that led us there, in the courage to be seen, in the wisdom to truly see others, and in the joy of creating something beautiful together. So if you're wondering how this story ends, the truth is it doesn't. Like all the best art, it simply continues, one stroke at a time, drawn by two people who learned that the greatest masterpiece isn't the one you create alone, it's the one you discover when you finally let someone else see the real you and find the courage to see yourself through their eyes. And somewhere on Instagram, on a page now run by two artists instead of one, a new post appears. It's a simple sketch of two empty coffee cups on familiar stone steps, accompanied by a single line of text. Every masterpiece starts with two people brave enough to draw together.